Welcome back to the Sports Lounge. Obviously not the Big 12, but the Pac-12 this year. We're looking at their additions of Colorado and Utah, both to the south. They don't do legends and leaders or any crap like that. They go north-south.
But they do a championship game in the home stadium.
They do. That is a little bit different. They are adding a championship game too as well, just like the Big Ten. But you look at Oregon, you look at Stanford. They seem to be the odds-on favorite to come out of this conference. They're in the same division. How do we see that battle ending up?
I think Oregon has the edge. Stanford will host that game when they play in November, I think. But after Oregon being in the national championship game and they bring the main cogs back on offense, and I think even though Stanford has Andrew Luck, Stanford lost a lot last year. So and they lose Jim Harbaugh. So I think it's going to be tough for Stanford to rattle off 11 or 12 wins like they did last year.
Agreed. I mean, I think whoever wins between Oregon and Stanford is going to play in the Pac-12 title game. I think as of right now, Oregon is better than Stanford. Stanford loses Jim Harbaugh, lose their defensive coordinator from last year, Vic Fangio, who helped them dramatically defensively. But as long as they have luck, I think they will take a step back, but they could beat anybody in the entire country. And he doesn't even have to get super hot. He just has to play fairly well, and they could probably beat anyone in the country.
Well, it's tough to duplicate it. Now, Stanford won, what, 11-1, 12-1 last season?
Yep.
One loss. I mean, Stanford lost pieces, and Harbaugh, that's a big loss. One of the bright young coaches in college football. But I think the key question is here is, if not Oregon, if not Stanford, then who? I mean, USC. Can you trust? Can you trust USC at this point? To Cal.
I mean, USC, they can win it. They won't be eligible for the title game.
Yeah,
right.
So I mean,
they could win.
Right.
That South. I mean, it's Arizona State. A lot of people are liking Arizona State to win that, but it's kind of like the SEC. You got the East and the West. Here you got the North and the South, where the power lies in the East and the SEC lies in the North, in the Pac-12 here. Is it kind of a similar situation?
I think I would agree with that. Just since we've had so many errors already, I think you meant the power lies in the SEC West, not the East.
May as well.
It's the first show.
Yeah, but I would still agree with what you're saying. I think the North looks much, much better than the South right now. I mean, in the North, you've got two teams ranked in the top 10 in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about UCLA possibly contending, on the south side of the bracket, then I think that really kind of is a testament to how wide open that South bracket is for sure.
Yeah, UCLA is going to be gunning for 6-6 probably.
Yeah.
So I mean, to say that they're going to be, competing for the conference championship is a little sketchy. I think USC is going to win this, but they can't play in it. So, too bad for them, I guess.
Does that mean Rick Neuheisel is gone then?
If he goes 6-6, he is. Yeah, because that's just a program that isn't going to tolerate that anymore. I think they see USC, and even though USC's not where they were 3 years ago, that is who they compare themselves to, and that's who they need to be.
Yeah, even with USC struggling in the last couple of years compared to their all-time high standards they had before that, they're still dramatically better than UCLA. In the last 4 years, I think they've made a bowl game once, and they beat Temple in a bowl game.
Oh.
And I don't know if that's going to really stir up the echoes of the alumni dramatically.
Kind of a de facto title game. You have Oregon and Stanford on November 12th. Whoever wins that game's got a very good chance of going to that conference title game. You look at the additions of Colorado and Utah. Colorado, we don't expect much from them, but Utah is an interesting team here. What can we expect from them going to the Pac-12?
I suppose with USC not eligible, and I'm suspect with Arizona State and UCLA, throw Utah in there too, because it's a program that obviously had success in the Mountain West, and we don't know what they're going to do in the Pac-12, but I guess it'd be hard to say to rule them out at this point.
Yeah, they're talented enough. I think they could win their division. I think it'll be different playing, teams that are better week in and week out, maybe not necessarily at the very top. Last year playing TCU, they're just as good as anyone in the Pac-12. But I think the week in, week out stuff could hinder them a little bit, but I think they still have an excellent shot of winning the South.
I don't think it's not the Utah of 2009. It's not the Utah of 2010.
So Utah 2011.
But I think the Utah of 2011 is a good team, can contend. However, I don't think they're a better team than USC. But again,
Well, they don't have
But they
to
don't have to.
I know they don't have to be. Well,
Are they better than
whatever.
everybody
on
else
the football
except
field? They're
them?
not as good as USC, but I think they're right in that cluster of Arizona State, of Utah. And so that number one I think is USC. 2, 3, 4, 5. That's
It's
up in the air, and then Colorado 6.
Yes.
Poor Colorado.
And you have Norm Chow, Utah's offensive coordinator, former USC guy. So that potentially could help them there as well. Agreed?
Agreed.
Maybe.
What's with Norm Chow?
Interesting.
He goes pops all around.
Why?
Norm Chow used to be one of the biggest names in all of football as far as being an offensive
And he's
guru.
not been a head coach.
People freaked out when he left USC and went to Tennessee to go coach Vince Young and the Titans, and thought that he was going to
Yeah.
mold Vince Young, into the next Steve Young, I guess, or something. And obviously that didn't work out.
How much does the difference, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, them having championship games for the first time? Maybe a chance to pad your resume there at the end of the year.
I think it makes a huge difference. And the one thing that people forget a lot is, you can get the one big game at the end to leap you into the title
Or-
game. But also, which happens all the time, you can have some team that knocks you out of the game. You could have, hypothetically, I'll use an example that won't happen just for fun, but let's say Colorado makes the Pac-12 title game, the 7-5 record somehow because the South's awful, and they beat Oregon. Well, Oregon is screwed now then.
And I think it makes a huge difference in the grand scheme of the layoff between the end of the season and the bowl games. There
Because the
used
Big
to,
Ten,
it
that
used to be-
7-week layoff from the Rose Bowl that they always talk
It
about.
used to be they'd play on the third Saturday in November, and that'd be the end of the season, and then you wait a month and a half before you play a bowl game, and now they moved back to Thanksgiving weekend. And now you're going to get that extra game in the first week of December. Maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't, but I think it sure beats waiting that long.
Well, and even if it doesn't make a difference, if anything, it at least just kind of keeps them in the minds of voters and fans and stuff, and not, oh yeah, I guess the Big Ten's been done for 3 weeks already. I forgot about them and what happened.
Right, that does it for the Pac-12. We'll get to the Big 12, the ACC, and the Big East on Thursday's show. But coming up next on the Sports Lounge, we're going to get into the University of Miami problem and all the fun they have down there at South Beach coming up here on the Sports Lounge. Abortions, prostitution, pimps, hoes, and strippers. Of course, we're talking about the University of Miami and all their problems. Yahoo Sports did a tremendous 11-month investigation on former University of Miami booster Nevin Shapiro, and he kind of spilled the beans on Miami about all the money and the jewelry and the parties and all that stuff I just mentioned. All the stuff he did for Miami from an 8-year period from 2002 to 2010 involving 72 players and coaches as well. So guys, is this a shock?
He definitely didn't spill a can of beans. It was like a 50-pound
It was like a 500 bushel wagon of beans on the interstate.
It was like Pac-Man Jones making it rain problems, I guess. That's just awful.
Are you surprised when you heard this, or has the shock kind of worn off on anything NCAA related?
It's not shocking at all. To the extent, maybe a little bit, but the idea that there could be somebody who is so obsessed with winning to the point where they're going to do things to make that happen.
And the thing
that's not
was,
surprising at all.
They weren't very good, though. They weren't. That was right after they came down from that national title bubble.
but that's not the point.
If you're going to do this, may as well win things there.
Well,
if you're paying people, get the best.
I agree to an extent.
Like Ohio
if you're
State-
going to get in trouble,
Yeah,
you better
yeah.
get your money's worth.
Well, we could talk about the Larry Coker effect as much as we want, but the fact is you can't. I don't think you can be surprised about this types of development anymore.
No.
Just in the past year, you have an Ohio State program now. Not decimated, but they definitely took a hit because of things like that, about players doing stuff they shouldn't do. And now the Miami one is just to the highest level of just obscene amounts of corruption going on. you can't be surprised anymore. This is happening every year in college football. It's at least one program.
And there wasn't a program that looked cleaner than Ohio State, really. I mean, I didn't like Ohio State, but I mean, that was a pretty clean program for a while, and it has all fallen off. And Miami, I mean, they haven't been clean for 25 years. So to say that this is a surprise, and then you add on the recent, every major powerhouse that's getting in trouble almost, every month or two.
To me, it's surprising. Not the fact that they did it. That's not surprising at all. But just to the extent that it is. I mean, this is corruption on super steroids right here. I mean, when we're talking about hookers and abortions and stuff that they're paying
Well,
for.
let me just, I want to clarify.
Is that TV safe?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is.
I think as long as we're presenting the facts, I would
As long as
assume
we're not
it's
showing
okay.
pictures, I would assume. And it was one abortion, not multiple. So as far as we know. As far as we know. You have Nevin Shapiro here, the guy, the former booster, got this nearly $1 billion Ponzi scheme. He's in the tank for 20 years now, and then he goes to Yahoo and he gets like 100 hours of interviews. And you see him. You've seen the videos. Him on the field, him giving the check at the bowling alley. Somebody that did this for so long, and he was very visible. He was very out there. How did they not just, is it like a Jim Tressel situation where they kind of knew about it, even though they're saying they didn't?
How can you say they don't know about it when the president of the university is holding that $50,000 check in the bowling alley? And you got to wonder where that money's coming from. You're like, oh, you're Nevin Shapiro. What exactly do you do again? Oh, I run a Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. How much does coaches, I mean, there's dozens of coaches on these staffs and 100 players. It's hard to keep track of them, obviously, but it seems like, once they quit contact after practice or a game, it's like they don't even know anything about these guys.
I think it's borderline offensive.
Because when
to
they
suggest that the executives don't know, yeah.
Because when they recruit these players, they do background checks and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to believe that they don't know anything about these guys when they come onto campus.
And it's impossible to know everything, but you're going to know just about everything about your guys. I mean, they're on your team. You're with them for 20 hours a week. That you're going to spend time with these guys. You're going to know what they're doing. You're going to hear them talking about whatever they're talking about.
Personally, I think there's a fair amount they can not know, but it's easier to get away with, say, a $1,000 handshake every 3 months. They're having prostitution rings on yachts and stuff. I think at a certain point, the level of it being so over the top. I mean, you'd think the compliance director would be like, oh, yeah, I was looking at my Facebook news feed the other day, and 4 of your defensive linemen are all snorting coke off hookers right now, or something like that.
Snorting what?
Allegedly, there was no drugs. I don't know. I went over the
Wow.
top there for shock value. Just call me Skip Bayless, I guess.
Well, if you have one, you'd assume you would have the other. Okay.
When
You assume hookers.
They didn't have the yellow pop or the Sprites at these parties.
Jeez. When you think about, if you said, okay, there's a weasel giving all this money to Miami, picture him. And then you see
looks like this guy.
you see a picture of Nevin Shapiro, and you're like, "Yep, that's him." It's like
you're right. It definitely has the look of a scoundrel, really.
And he's running a Ponzi scheme. I mean, it's perfect.
Yep.
Apparently, it was pretty successful, almost $1 billion. I mean, that's.
No, they're always successful for a while.
Well, then
They're successful till you end in jail.
until you keep paying people with other
Yeah.
people's money and you run
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
money to pay other people with.
Him and Bernie Madoff are probably cellmates and probably coming up another scheme right now.
With Ohio State and Jim Tressel. is-
Huge
Wow.
horsefly
That
on
was
Prince's head
awesome.
right
That's
now.
huge.
That's been here since
That's
probably.
gonna be on the highlight reel.
Probably been here since May. If you look at Jim Tressel, and we talked about how he actually knew what was going on and he covered it up. But it was Terrell Pryor and a handful of other guys that really got in trouble with the tattoos and the selling of their rings and jerseys and all that. So, that's a situation where you could believe him if he was actually telling the truth, but he wasn't. You could believe that, they could sneak that under the table. That's not something huge. And if they weren't student athletes, that wouldn't be a big deal. But then you have this situation here, 8 years, 72 players, and a basketball coach, multiple assistant coaches in football. That's just the reason why it's hard for me to believe.
And how many current guys too that are?
There's like 15. Dozen to 15 current guys.
And Ja'Cory Harris is saying, acting like it's not a big deal, and It's like, well,
And saying on Facebook, "Oh, I'll play again." No, your career's done.
I don't think it's his
not playing
decision anymore. No.
Yeah, Ja'Cory Hatch doesn't have to worry about, any future reputation. He's got a long ways to go if he's in an NFL uniform.
well, at least he has that long career in academia that he can rely on.
That's true.
And this is one thing that let's remember between Ohio State and Miami. Ohio State, what they did is illegal according to the NCAA rules. It is completely legal in the general public. You could go somewhere and sell your stuff for money and get tattoos. We all could if we want to. Prostitution is illegal. It is not legal in the first place. And all the other things they did that maybe aren't illegal in general are very illegal in the NCAA.
They're definitely frowned upon.
Yeah.
Well, Southern Methodist University set the standard for, dishonesty, corruption, just general
$100 handshake.
sluicing and so forth. I think, the question is, does this newest scandal kind of rival that? And I think it does. I mean, it's an absolutely confounding amount of money involved, and how long it's gone on, and with how many players. I think this is way up there in the ranks of general corruption in NCAA football for sure.
I think it's a good comparison. You look at Ohio State, a quiet Big Ten school. They do all the right things. That's their version of a big-time problem. Then you have a team down south like an SEC school or a school down south like Miami, and that's their version of a big-time thing. That's a big difference between the things. And I bring up the SEC because I think they're a conference that has kind of gotten under the radar as far as this type of stuff. You had the Auburn thing with Cam Newton, but I think in the years to come, I think things are going to come out about that conference, possibly that could be damaging as well.
And we've heard whispers about Alabama, and some of their recruiting things, and I'm sure there's other schools in the SEC who were. Miami's not the only one, that's for sure. And I mean, when these teams are fighting for the same players, and who's going to pony up the most kind of deal when you're trying to get a guy.
And one thing to remember, I think in all likelihood, 3 years from now, Auburn will not have a 2010 national title or Heisman Trophy anymore either.
Well, yeah, that seems like all true. That there's other programs out there that are not exactly swimming in integrity right now. And I think the thing that's getting lost is all of this that's going on is all because people want to win, and it's getting a little bit. I think college football is in need of some pretty serious reform. I mean, and I'm not even talking about the BCS. That's a whole other animal in itself. But the fact is, all these programs want to go 13-1, 13-0, and win a national title every single year. So when that doesn't happen, and if that doesn't happen for several years, well, things start to happen. The pressure of that begins. That cracks on a program, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's okay to have a 9-3 season. It's okay to go 10-2, and win, the Sugar Bowl. I mean, it's gotten completely outrageous. The notion that, well, it's all about winning. It's all about winning. Well, one team technically wins every year. All right. It's not going to be you every year. It's not going to be you every 5 years. So when you win it, you should really cherish that, and then understand that it's difficult to win a championship, especially in college football, because one loss and that can put you, into the ground for the whole season.
And there's so much money at stake when you talk about the coaches and the bowls and everything. Television and the universities put so much. How many universities can you think of that put in all their chips on football, and you don't even hear their basketball program when it comes to the winter? There's a ton. There's a ton of schools that do that, and
football's the big money maker.
Right.
You mentioned, the pressure to win, and that's part of the problem. How much would a playoff help that? Where there's only 2 spots now to play for the national title. There was a 4, maybe even an 8-team playoff. They can say, okay, we can lose 1 or 2 games, we'll still get a chance for the national title. Because you don't see this going on as often in college basketball, because that's not the case.
Well, it's a really interesting sort of sub-effect to think that a playoff could trickle down and therefore
there'd be more money
lessen the
involved
impact.
Too.
Yeah, that, and it could lessen the impact of a program, to go all out and have the cards fall right and win every single game, go undefeated. I think that takes a little bit of pressure off, but I think when it comes down to it, there's going to be boosters out there. There's going to be people want to get into the program. Like I think that's what Evan Shapiro wanted. He wanted in, and he wanted to make friends with Hurricane players, and therefore here comes the money. Here comes the yacht parties.
Yep.
And so forth. So I think there's not going to be a simple resolution to that, but I think by establishing a playoff, you definitely take some weight off an individual player's shoulders, off the program's shoulders, and take some of that away. And I think that would be more like college basketball in that regard.
Personally, I think a playoff would actually make it worse.
Really?
I mean, not.
I agree.
I think it would, because in any given year, you're going to have 4 or 5 teams that are going to say national title or bust. Anything else, we're disappointed. Where now you get another 10 or 15 teams that they'll be happy just playing in a BCS game. Like I think last year, for example, I think TCU wasn't. I mean, they were a little disappointed they didn't play for the national title. They will look back on the season with fond memories, though. Where if you get an 18 playoff, if you don't make the playoff and you go to some bowl game, but you aren't playing in a playoff, then it's going to be a complete disaster of a season.
Yeah, but
it's going to go to all that matters is making the playoffs.
Yeah,
nothing else is going to matter.
There's
after
no
that.
way that Stanford looks back on last year and goes 12-1 and beats Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl and says that's a bad season because they didn't win the national championship. I mean, for a team like them, that's a great season. I think they're a school that realizes that. Now, could Stanford fall into sanctions down the road? I don't know, but I think they can look back on, like TCU, and look back and say, yeah, that was a really good year. Or,
Well, yeah, but I mean, do fans feel that way? I know if Alabama doesn't win a title this year, is that a success for them?
No.
If LSU loses to Oregon, and if LSU ends up losing 3 games this year, was that a successful year for them? Fans are going to think so. Maybe some players might go, well, we had a good year, we just fell a little short. But still, I think the emphasis on winning has gotten to a point where, you're seeing the effects of it. You're seeing it on a monthly basis with Miami, with Ohio State, on down the line. So it's an issue ongoing.
And one more thing on the playoff thing. I think if college football goes to a playoff, they're kind of at a crossroads then, deciding whether or not do you really care about the students and academics? And you're gonna add 3 more weeks onto the season, and you're gonna work through Christmas and all that, or are you gonna? I mean, I'm a proponent on just adding one, the +1 and calling it good, because I think if you have 4 teams, trying to joust it out for a championship, that would be better than 2 like it is now.
And one thing to also, if you look at it, the corruption-wise, if the NCAA would crack down harder on a lot of these teams, I mean, I don't know if I want them to use the death penalty per se, but let's say you give 5 teams right now in trouble the death penalty, I think cheating will not run nearly as rampant for a long time then.
Because the penalties they give out, does it deter them not to do it? You look at USC, pretty stiff penalties, scholarships, no postseason for a couple of years. But and we'll see what happens with Ohio State and Miami. But is that really enough to deter these colleges from doing this? Or is it worth the risk to do that?
I think with what USC got, it's kind of a coin flip. It depends. But they usually don't give out as bad as USC got either. I mean, usually, 5 or 6 years ago at Oklahoma, when they got rid of Rhett Bomar and whatever offensive linemen, they vacated their wins from the previous year, which I've never understood. I mean, they say, oh, well, you didn't win those 8 games. Well, the players all know they won them. People remember seeing them. I mean, I think it's the worst penalty you can do in terms of having an effect on anything.
If you really want to, if you're going to vacate wins, you better take back the ticket.
Take back the money they made.
Take back the money they made then.
The $17 million the conference makes from the BCS
The games didn't happen, right? So you can take back the money.
Take back the gate from the 80,000, 90,000 filling the stadium. Then
because I bet you that would hurt a whole lot more than
Yes.
taking away scholarships or vacating wins or putting them on probation for 2 years. I think that would probably hurt at least a little bit more. And like you said, if you put the top 10 teams, the last 10 teams to have sanctions on the death penalty, you'd find a way to stop this mess that's in college football.
When's the last team that we remember that won a national title that wasn't involved in something? You have Auburn, you have LSU, they've kind of Florida. You mentioned the SEC teams. You mentioned Oklahoma.
If the
USC.
Tim Tebow era was clean, then I think they would be the last ones, but that has doubts too.
Yeah.
So.
Alrighty. When we come back here in the Sports Lounge, we'll get the fancy true-false cards out. Everybody will ask the question, and we'll go around the horn here and see what college football questions they have for us. Here coming up when we return here on the Sports Lounge.